All right, let's talk about one of the most frantic, brutal, and downright insane scrambles for wealth in all of human history, the Klondike Gold Rush. This isn't just a story about digging for gold. Nope. This is about what happens when incredible ambition collides head-on with the unforgiving reality of the frozen north. So let's get into it. Can you imagine waking up one morning and seeing this headline screaming at you from the front page? In the summer of 1897, a couple of ships, heavy with gold, docked in Seattle and San Francisco. The press absolutely lost its mind, and this news kicked off a worldwide craze that people literally called Klondicitis, like it was a disease. And honestly, it kind of was. And this number gives you an idea of just how contagious that disease was. About 100,000 people. Think about that. These weren't adventurers or frontiersmen. These were clerks, teachers, salesmen. Even the mayor of Seattle himself just dropped everything, quit his job, and headed north to chase this dream of gold. Okay, so gold fever stripes. Where did this sudden madness come from? Well, the crazy part is the actual discovery happened almost a whole year earlier. On August 16th, 1896, a few guys, George Carmack and Skookum Jim, spotted some gold in a creek. But out there in the middle of nowhere, news traveled at a snail's pace. But you have to understand, the world was practically begging for a story like this. People were hurting. A couple of major financial panics in the 1890s had left tons of people unemployed and desperate. So when this news about rivers filled with gold finally hit, it wasn't just about getting rich. For thousands, it felt like a lifeline, a last best hope. So, you've caught the gold fever. You've packed your bags. Now what? Well, now comes the impossibly hard part. Getting there was an ordeal so difficult it became a kind of filter, weeding out pretty much everyone except the most hardcore or maybe just the most stubborn. And here is the single most important rule of the entire gold rush. The Canadian authorities, the famous Mounties, were not about to let tens of thousands of people starve to death in their territory. So they made a law. You could not cross the border into the Yukon unless you had a year's worth of supplies with you. We're talking nearly 2,000 pounds of gear, a literal ton. It was a logistical nightmare. And just look at what a ton of goods actually meant. This is just a tiny sample of the shopping list. 400 pounds of flour, 150 pounds of bacon. And this doesn't even touch the tents, the stoves, the tools, the clothes. Now imagine having to buy all that and then physically carry it over a mountain. And to get over those mountains, you basically had two options. And trust me, it was like choosing your poison. You could take the Chilkoot Trail, which was shorter but brutally steep, ending in a 1,000-foot-high staircase that was cut directly into the ice. Or you could try the easier White Pass Trail, which turned into a swamp of mud so bad that 3,000 horses died on it. Yeah, they didn't call it the Dead Horse Trail for nothing. Now, obviously, you can't carry a ton of stuff on your back at once. So how did they do it? With this soul-crushing method. You'd load up, say, 65 pounds, hike it a few miles up the trail, drop it, then walk all the way back down to get the next pack. To get your entire ton of goods over a single pass, you'd have to make that trip more than 30 times. People calculated that you'd walk about 2,500 miles before you even really started your journey. Insane. So let's say you do it. You survive the trails. You make it. Your reward? Dawson City. This was the chaotic, muddy, sprawling heart of the gold rush. A city that basically exploded into existence in the middle of nowhere. I mean, just look at this growth. It's truly mind-boggling. In 1896, this place was home to maybe 500 people. 2 years later, 17,000. It became the biggest, wildest city west of Winnipeg and north of San Francisco, all built on a frozen swamp. But, city is a generous term. The dream of gold was built on a reality of pure filth. There was no running water, no sanitation. Disease was everywhere. Typhoid, dysentery, scurvy was so common they had a nickname for it, Canadian black leg. It sounds awful, because it was. And because everything had to be hauled in over those ridiculous trails, prices were just astronomical. Let's say you wanted a fresh egg in the winter of 1898. If you could even find one, it would set you back $3. That is over $100 in today's money for one single egg. And this is where you get some of the most legendary stories. There was this one gambler, Swiftwater Bill Gates, who actually struck it rich. So the story goes, he was trying to woo a woman who loved eggs, but he saw her having dinner with another guy. So, in a fit of jealousy, he supposedly bought every single $100 egg in Dawson City and fed them to his dogs, just to show off. Which brings us to the big question. After all that, the deadly journey, the diseases, the absurd prices, what were your actual chances of ending up like Swiftwater Bill? Let's talk about the myth versus the reality. You see, even if you made it to the Klondike, the ground itself fought you tooth and nail. You couldn't just stick a shovel in the dirt. A few feet down, you hit permafrost, ground that's frozen solid. The only way to get through it was to build a fire on top of it, let it thaw about a foot of muck, dig that out, and then start the whole process over again. It was brutally slow, miserable work. And this chart right here, well, it tells the whole story. This is the hard truth. Of the tens of thousands of people who endured everything to get to Dawson, maybe a few hundred got truly rich. That's about 1%. One. The overwhelming majority either found nothing and went home broke, or they ended up having to work for that lucky 1%. And you know what? The whole frenzy ended just as quickly as it began. The same gold fever that drove everyone north in the first place would soon pull them somewhere else entirely. By 1899, the easy-to-get gold in the Klondike was mostly gone. And then a new rumor started. Gold in Nome, Alaska. And this time, they said, you didn't even have to dig for it. It was just lying on the beach. Well, that was all it took. Within weeks, 8,000 people bailed on Dawson and headed for the next big thing. And just like that, the Klondike Gold Rush was over. But the story doesn't just end there. The rush left behind some deep, lasting scars. For the indigenous Han people who had lived on that land for thousands of years, it was a complete catastrophe. They were forced off their land, their hunting grounds were destroyed, and they were devastated by diseases they had no immunity to. So in the end, the Klondike Gold Rush is this powerful, epic myth. It's a story of adventure and fortune, but it created unbelievable wealth for a tiny few and unimaginable hardship for almost everyone else. And it really leaves you with a big question. For those 100,000 people who chased that dream, was it actually worth the crushing price of admission?